This is Open to Debate. I'm John Donvan. Hi, everybody. Since missiles from Iran reached the skies over Israel only nights ago and sirens sounded across the country, their wailing pitch has asked a question. What next? Things were already going in a dangerous cycle. Israel had assassinated Hezbollah's leader in Lebanon, whose ally was Iran. That was partly payback for Hezbollah firing rockets into Israel all year long. Iran responded by sending those nearly 200 missiles into Israel. That was more payback. And now, by the logic of this endless dynamic, it is Israel's turn to pay back Iran, which Israel's prime minister is promising will happen. Quoting Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel has the duty and the right to defend itself and respond to these attacks, and it will do so. In the recent past, the U.S. has been urging Israel to show response. Right now, its statements are slightly more ambivalent. But just as the world is divided on Israel's war in Gaza, so is it split on what Israel can and should do about Iran, with concerns about a wider war and more casualties and more instability. With this as context, join us as we debate the question, should Israel strike Iran? Let's meet our debaters. Answering yes to the question, should Israel strike Iran, I want to welcome Michael Doran, Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at the Hudson Institute. Michael, welcome back, actually, to Open the Debate. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here, John.
And here to answer no to the question, which again is, should Israel strike Iran, I want to welcome Dr. Shira Effron. Shira is Senior Director of Policy Research at the Israel Policy Forum. Shira, welcome to Open to Debate.
Thank you for having me.
So let's move on to our opening statements. We would like each of you to take a few minutes to explain why you're answering yes or no to our question. Michael, you're up first, and you are answering yes to the question, should Israel strike Iran? Please tell us why.
Well, thank you, John. I wouldn't say just that Israel should. Israel has to. It has no choice. And it has been put in that position by the United States. I think it's really important that we understand the causes of this war. The Biden administration has habitually framed the war as an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it has told us that the solution to the war, the end of the war, should be some kind of ceasefire in Gaza. But it is objectively not a Palestinian-Israeli conflict, or not just a Hamas-Israel conflict. The day after Hamas opened up against Israel, Hezbollah attacked Israel in the north. That's on October 8th. Shortly thereafter, the Houthis got involved. And then shortly after that, we had the militias in Iraq and Syria, all operated by Iran or activated by Iran, guided by Iran. So this is very much Iran's war. Iran started it. And the goal of the war is to weaken not just Israel, but the American alliance system. And unfortunately, the Biden administration has defined it, as I said, as a Palestinian-Israeli war, and it has looked to Israeli restraint constantly to solve the problem. The problem will only be solved by deterring Iran. And something amazing has happened in the last few weeks, John. It's really, really remarkable. Israel has decapitated Hezbollah, and it has turned it into an organization that's not capable of threatening Israel with ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. These are the disruptive military capabilities that Iran has been distributing to its proxies around the region. When we talked about a war between Israel and Iran, or between Israel and Hezbollah just a few months ago, we thought of nightmare scenarios of thousands and thousands of precision-guided weapons fired from short range from Lebanon, raining down on Israel, because Iran was using Hezbollah as the shield of its nuclear program. And now the shield has been destroyed effectively. It is no longer what it was, and Iran is laid bare. It's naked. And it's an enormous opportunity for the United States and for Israel, for the entire Western world, to finally rid themselves or at least diminish significantly the threat to peace and security that Iran represents. Every president since Bill Clinton has said that it is unacceptable that Iran should develop a nuclear weapon. And yet Iran has marched forward and forward and forward under the term of every president, and gotten closer to a nuclear weapon, so that now Iran is just weeks away from having enough fissile material to build a nuclear weapon, and just months away from actually having a device that it can put on one of the ballistic missiles of the kind that it shot at Israel already twice in the last few months. If given the fact that Iran has lost its shield, Hezbollah, the threat to the world of actually stripping Iran of its nuclear capabilities and stripping Iran of its disruptive military capabilities has diminished significantly. We can't let them rebuild. We can't let them come back. This is the time. We have them on the ropes, or we don't have them on the ropes. The Israelis have them on the ropes, looking after their own interests, because they've been put in this position by the United States, which is, by engaging Iran, has allowed it to carry out aggressive actions around the region. So we have an opportunity now. The risk to us is less than ever before. The risk to the Israelis. Let's seize the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Michael. Shira, you're taking the opposite side. You believe that Israel should not strike Iran. You have 4 minutes to make your case.
You know, the format today sets up the discussion about what Israel should do about Iran in quite a binary way. And I think what we need to offer is nuance, because this is a complex problem. And let me say up front that Israel must respond militarily to Iran's attack. However, and this is where Mike ended up, I don't think that this attack should be on Iranian nuclear facilities. And that is quite a big difference. So mulling through the available choices, I'll explain you why I don't think it needs to be on the nuclear sites. However, and this might be where the contrast between us is less stark than you'd think, is that after after Iran fired 300 drones and missiles on Israel on April 14th, and last week launched 201 ballistic missiles on Israel, Israel should, in fact, retaliate. Why not on the nuclear issue? Why not on Iran's nuclear facilities? The first reason is technical. At the stage of the Iranian program now, and we can get into it in the discussion, Israel cannot destroy the program. It can only set it back. And it's not clear by how much, definitely not if it's operating by itself. We can speak about it more, but the sites of Iran's nuclear program are around 1,000 miles away from Israel. They're not located at a single facility. They're scattered all over. There are 21 reported sites. There are other clandestine sites. They are fortified. They are hidden in ways that I'll give you an example. Even the Fordo and Natanz sites. Fordo was built inside of a mountain, and Natanz was built at a depth of around 320 feet, so a depth that even the bunker-busting bombs may not be able to penetrate. Getting there is also a problem. There are a few countries in between Israel and Iran, countries that are friendly and others that are not friendly, and they would have to be notified. So this takes away the element of surprise, country like Iraq, and also agree to Israel using its airspace. The aircraft itself, it doesn't only need to reach the target, but it also needs to return. We're talking about dozens or even hundreds of aircraft would have to execute this mission, exiting Iran without an escort envelope that Israel cannot provide to such a large-scale mission, definitely not without the U.S. support. And that brings me to my next point. With all the criticism that Mike pointed to the Biden administration, this is the administration that now we have. The administration is not supportive of this action at the moment. And sitting here in Tel Aviv, I will tell you that what October 7 reinforced to all Israelis is the dependence of this country on the United States. Damaging the U.S. now, when Israel needs the U.S. most to continue the campaign against Hezbollah that is so successful, to continue the campaign on the 6 other fronts, except for Iran, that Israel is fighting, would be detrimental to Israel's security. Now, taking those immense risks, the military ones, because Iran will retaliate, and the proxies, even though undermined, they still exist. We had 12 casualties here in Tel Aviv yesterday, some by Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not finished. Lose all international support, including the United States, to achieve an outcome that would not destroy the Iranian nuclear program, but even under the most optimistic scenario would only damage it. to me, is taking a risk that we should not be taking at the moment. What it will surely do is not only, maybe we will undermine Iranian capabilities a bit, but what we will do is strengthen their resolve. And at the stage of the Iranian program at the moment, and the knowledge that its engineers and what we call the weapons group have, they can recover the program and make it much more durable in the future. And for sure, an Israeli attack will harden Iranian resolve. What I think we should do instead is extract the cost from Iran directly, but be strategic. After a very painful year here, the IDF has finally achieved what we call escalation dominance on Hezbollah. Let's continue degrading the ring of fire that the Iranian axis created around Israel, create a diplomatic front to
Shira,
sanction.
I have to jump in, Shira, because you've hit time. But I think you've covered pretty much what you wanted to say, so I think this was an opportune time to break in. Just to get your perspective, since both of you have been following foreign policy and working in this field for a long time, does this moment feel like it's different from all other, when I covered Israel as a journalist for a long time, and what we always said is it's the same story 30 years later, 30 years on, the same situation is going on. I'm curious to hear whether you feel there's something different happening this time. Shira, can you go first?
I mean, there's no question that something is happening, having lived in both countries, in the US and Israel. I think what October 7th did to Israel is really appended the sense of security. What Israelis always knew is that they can feel secure in their country. And October 7th changed that fundamentally. A threat that was really dismissed from Gaza, 6 other fronts, right? We're talking about Lebanon, the West Bank, Syria, Yemen, Iraq, and Iran. I think for the first time ever, up until maybe a few weeks ago, when the tide has changed vis-a-vis Hezbollah, Israelis have felt again, first time since 1948, that they're facing an existential threat, and the whole region is on edge. So I think your sentiment and what you are feeling is absolutely correct.
Thank you very much. And Michael, same question for you. Does this time feel different in any way?
Absolutely. I agree with everything that Shira just said from the Israeli point of view. I just add a few more things. I think everyone can now see pretty clearly, maybe not everyone, but most people, that the United States is adopting a different posture in the region than it has historically. I think this has been going on since Obama, but people were kidding themselves. The U.S. is acting not simply as the ally of Israel, but kind of a mediator between Israel and Iran. Everyone in the region is absorbing what that means, and they're behaving accordingly. The Israelis understand that deterrence of Iran, deterrence of its enemies, depends primarily on them, not on the United States. They can't subcontract any of that to their major ally. And with all of the feelings that they have that Shira described, they are taking care of business as they need to. It's the end of the two-state solution. We haven't. A lot of the international community has yet to catch up to that. But also in the last, you say different. In the last few weeks, as I said in my opening comments, the Hezbollah has been transformed into a different kind of organization than it was just a few months ago. I don't want to say that it's completely finished. That's probably a gross exaggeration, but it has been diminished significantly, and the Israelis will not let it come back. We're not going to see it again.
Interesting to hear you both agree on this fact that this moment feels unique. But after this, we're going to hear how you disagree on what should be happening. So, Michael, we heard you say in your opening that Iran represents the major source of instability and risk in the Middle East, not just for Israel, but also for the United States, and I think you would say even beyond that, and that we are at a unique moment in history, in the history of the region, in terms of Iran's sudden vulnerability militarily because of having lost a great deal of its shield with the diminishment of Hezbollah at the hands of Israel, and that if ever there was a time to strike Iran, and I think you're saying for once and for all, that moment has come up now, especially because they are getting so close to being nuclear capable. Shira, you are saying, yes, of course there needs to be a response to Iran's missile attack militarily, but the idea of going after nuclear plant, this kind of massive strike on the nuclear program, is just impractical. Iran is too far away. The facilities are too spread out. They're too hard to find. They're too well fortified. At best, there would be a a little bit of a hit that Iran would survive, and then Iran would want to be coming back as well. And so you're just feeling that particular sort of massive going in big strike against the nuclear side of Iran is just ill-advised. So I want to go back to you, Michael, and ask you, the main argument we heard from Shira against going after Iran's nuclear facilities is that it's just impractical. It can't really be done successfully. What about that?
Well, this is going to be really boring for you, John, because I agreed with about 90% of what Shira said. When viewed from the Israeli point of view at this particular moment. But the thing that I was most struck by in her comments was that she said, we can't do this because the United States is against it. And this is where I want to put the emphasis of my remarks, John, is that the United States should be for it. The United States should see that Israel's actions in Lebanon and also in Gaza by all but destroying Hamas and diminishing Hezbollah have created an opportunity that we need to seize. One thing that I do disagree with Shira about is that she said an attack on Iran by Israel will simply harden Iran's resolve and encourage it to race to a bomb. I would say that we're already a little bit pregnant with that in that regard because of the decapitation of Hezbollah by Israel. The Iranians feel extremely vulnerable already, not simply because of they're not going to feel even more vulnerable because Israel is going after their nuclear program. If they think that the nuclear program is a shield from external attack, then believe me, they have every reason now to really go for it, which is one of the things that we need to think about. This war has already taken us to a point where the Iranians are likely to race for a bomb, and we need to stop that.
Well, we have not so far, and I'm not going to talk about intelligence materials, but we have not seen so far Iran's decision to break into a bomb. It's very convenient for them to be in a place, I agree, where they can make the decision and break in very, very quickly. And there is a question, as Israel is hitting on their basically second strike capability, right? Hezbollah, the crown jewel of its axis of proxies, has been designed as a second strike capability against an attack on its nuclear facilities. You can argue that as Hezbollah is being degraded, they're now facing a more strategic choice whether to break or not. And I assess, based on a variety of sources, that will strengthen their resolve to go in that direction. I will say also, the technical issue is really important, and I didn't mean to imply that Israel cannot dent its program substantially. We can extract a damage, right? But there's an issue of capability and intent. On the capabilities with or without Israel and with the United States, and participation, cooperation, tacit one from regional players, maybe we can lead to damage their program. The intent, I'm pretty sure it would push them in the other direction. I just want to say another point that we have to remember at the moment, sitting here in Tel Aviv. If you think of Yahya Sinwar, Hamas mass murderer terrorists still alive in Gaza, his wet dream is to bring to a regional all-out war, escalation, to create a rift between Israel and the United States, right? That's what he wants. Why are we playing into his hands? Finally, Israel has reached escalation dominance. Let's keep the eye on the ball. try to finish the proxies and have a different strategy when we come to Iran and make it face this decision that at least as the best as, to my knowledge, Iran has not made.
The question isn't, has Iran made the decision today to get a nuclear weapon? Iran is within days of having enough fissile material to build several nuclear.
Can I just break interject?
Devices.
Do we all agree to that, Shira? Do you agree that assessment is not controversial?
It's between weeks and months, but
okay.
Yes, it's very.
I just wanted to make sure that wasn't in dispute. Michael, back to you, please.
Okay, I'll say weeks. It's within weeks of having enough fissile material. It's within months of having an actual warhead that it can put on a ballistic missile. The threat that we have, Shira mentioned escalation dominance. Right now, what's going on between Israel and Iran is a fight for escalation dominance between the two of them. Israel significantly diminished the Iranian capabilities, which were displayed after the April 13 barrage. The April 13 barrage was a nightmare for Israel's leaders because it combined two challenges simultaneously that reinforce each other. One is the disruptive military capabilities that Iran has. All these drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, which it puts together in combined strike packages that can overwhelm Israeli sensors and interceptors. The other is American restraint. The only way that Israel can counter these disruptive military capabilities that Iran has, the impunity with which it shoots them off, the impunity with which it gives it to its proxies, is by taking away from Iran things that Iran holds dear. And it started that process with the decapitation of Hezbollah. Iran then countered with the latest barrage of ballistic missiles. If Iran were to put a nuclear warhead on one of those all those ballistic missiles that they shot against Israel on October 1, which penetrated Israeli defenses. We have to be clear about that. They hit the Nevatim air base, which is where Israel's F-35s are. If Iran were to get 5 nuclear weapons and 5 nuclear devices, warheads, and put them on these ballistic missiles, which are all nuclear capable, and shoot them off in the 5 amidst a barrage of 100 or 200 missiles, Israel has no way of knowing which missile is nuclear capable and which isn't. And so this is something that has to weigh very, very heavily on the Israeli leadership, but also on us. This is a security threat to the United States. Those missiles that hit Israel from Iran can also hit Ukraine. Iran is already.
So, but Michael, let me just break in. I understand you're laying out the threat that Iran represents, but to the degree that what Shira is arguing is that you really can't. Israel can't go in and do this alone. I know you're agreeing with that, but she's also arguing that it would provoke something that nobody seems to want, an all-out war. Or are you arguing that it can be one and done in terms of going?
I'm saying two things. I'm saying that the whole idea of the negotiations with Iran, the JCPOA, and all of everything that surrounded it, was to keep Iran from becoming from having breakout capability, and to keep it a year from breakout. And breakout was defined as the condition that Iran now enjoys, that it's within a few weeks of having the fissile material to have a weapon. So the idea that we're going to have the time, once Iran makes the decision to go for a bomb, the idea that we're going to have the time to say, oh no, we're going to have to take action to prevent this, is now nonsensical. The reality has moved on.
So, Shira, I think what I hear Michael saying is that you can't kind of sit around much longer and hope for things to work out, that Iran represents a threat immediately now, and that threat needs to be directly addressed, by which he means a military action. What is your take on that assessment?
I don't want to make this boring for you, so I will go back to the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement with Iran that I don't want to go back and defend it. But I think that the expectations of the nuclear agreement with Iran were overblown. I never thought it will change Iranian behavior. I didn't think it will make Iran join the Zionist movement. What it was supposed to do is set back the Iranian program, which it did, until the Trump administration decided to pull away from the agreement. And by the way, being in that agreement freed Israeli IDF sources to focus on Hezbollah, and the fruit of that labor we're seeing in a very successful campaign today. So I think just to go back to that, I do not disagree about the description of the threat, but the outcome of a preemptive strike, which, when has history even done a preemptive strike on something that is the scale of the Iranian program? This is not Iraq in 1981. This is not Syria in 2007. Those are entirely things for a mission that will not be perfect. By far, it will not be perfect, and it would lead to a regional escalation that no one at the moment wants. And I dare to say, even in rooms inside of Israel's national security establishment, because, speaking from the US, it's a whole different issue. But in Israel, the IDF is stretched way too thin. It's fighting, as I said, on 7 fronts for over a year. People have been in reserve duty for 200 days, including fighter pilots. This is just not a realistic option. What I do think we need to do, and if we move forward to what we need to do, when President Trump pulled away from JCPOA, he put this strategy of maximum pressure, which focused on economic sanctions. What we are doing now at the moment, what Israel is doing, is maximum pressure on the proxies. This needs to be supported. This needs to continue all around, including with the sanction regime, and we can get to why I do think it's important, and have a coherent U.S. policy that's bipartisan, because I would argue that it's like, yes, an agreement, no, an agreement, we're not sure, only bolsters Iranian ambitions, and it confuses everyone else, to be honest, and have a credible threat, which at the moment we don't have. I don't think we have to execute the threat, but we should have a credible military threat if everything else is lost.
For members of our audience who may not be familiar with the agreement that's being referred to, it's called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. It's no longer really effective, but it was an agreement reached under the leadership of the Obama administration and 5 other countries and Iran, under which sanctions were lifted on Iran, in return for which Iran was allowing inspections and putting some slowdown on its nuclear development. That plan, as Shira pointed out, was kind of fell apart and is no longer effective. I just want to provide that background. Michael, I just want to go back to you. What I hear Shira's referred to the risk of all-out war, and it seems that when the Biden administration is urging de-escalation, which frustrates a lot of people who want Israel to be doing more, that its concern also is you light that match in Iran, it can just go on and on and on. China could get involved, Russia can get involved, it could get bigger and bigger. You haven't addressed that scenario, and I'm wondering if it's because you feel it's a price worth paying, or it's a price that doesn't have to be paid.
I think the key is American policy. Where I have great sympathy with everything that Shira is saying is, and if I were to paraphrase, is she's saying, how can this guy who's sitting in Washington, D.C., tell the Israeli military or the Israeli public to go take this massive risk on behalf of his ideas of what of what's going to be good for the world, when we have to take all of the consequences? And I have to say, I completely agree with her. Because that's not what I'm saying. Israel right now, under the current policies of the United States, would probably be very unwise to do what I'm saying, because the United States is not supporting it. What I'm saying is that the United States should support such a thing. It should come in behind Israel. The job of the United States is to hold the ring, so that Israel can that can contain the Israeli-Iranian conflict within certain bounds. The Biden administration has it exactly wrong about how to contain this. The Biden administration has been preaching since October 7th that we don't, and then literally since October 7th, the evening while the Hamas terrorists were raping and murdering all in the Gaza periphery, the Biden administration spokesmen were out saying, we don't want this to become a wider war, and we want to work to contain it just to Gaza. But what's happened? It's gotten wider and wider because the Iranians understand that the United States will put a shield of protection over them by telling the Israelis not to attack Iranians. And the United States, when it's even directly attacked, we've been directly attacked by Iran's proxies in Iraq, in Syria, in Jordan, and also on the seas, in the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And in response, our rules of engagement militarily restrict our military from killing an Iranian. We can't kill an Iranian in Yemen, even though Iran is doing this to us. The only way we bring stability to the region is if we deter Iran. And to deter Iran, I agree entirely with Shira, you need a credible military threat, not just from Israel, but from the United States. But the only way, after this long period of appeasement of Iran by the United States, the only way you establish a credible military threat is by taking military action. Iran will never believe that it has to restrict its nuclear activities until things start being taken away from it.
And you mean, Michael, just very briefly, I want this in 10 seconds because I want to get to Shira. You mean very major military action?
I mean, yesterday, the defense minister
if you
of Israel,
can do 10 seconds on this, because I want to bring it back to Shira.
Let me quote the defense minister of Israel. It should be lethal. It should be significant, and it should be a surprise.
Sure.
You can scare the bejeebas out of the Ayatollah Khamenei without carpet bombing Tehran.
Sure.
So first of all, just Mike, I know you personally, and I also know from your writings that you're not this guy in Washington pushing the Israelis to assume risks. I know you care deeply about the safety of Israel and the people of this region. So rest assured. On the Biden administration, even if we criticize current policy, I will just say, as someone who's Israeli American, never but have been in Israel, in this country, Israel would have been done for if it wasn't for the support of the Biden administration. And while Hamas was still beheading babies in the south part of this country, the Biden administration came in with munitions and diplomatic support that really, I can't imagine what Israel would look like if it didn't. And they should be getting credit for this, even if they fail to deter the regional war that they meant to do later on. But in all fairness, I think this needs to be said. Now, when we talk about a credible military threat, there's a credible military threat that is directed specifically about the nuclear program, and that should be restored. But I see the fact that the U.S. Greenlighting other targets for Israel and supplying the munitions, and don't get it wrong, we have no munitions without the U.S., right? It's mostly U.S., and there are a few other countries that have placed embargoes on Israel at the moment, and tacitly arranging the system and being here, and the assets in the Middle East, despite this attempted pivot to Asia, which hasn't occurred with the last three administrations, being here with presence that on the one hand protects Israel, but also on the other, as has been reported from the Pentagon, emboldens Israel to take action. So I don't see this as such as the U.S. not having a credible threat on Iran. I think what we are trying to talk about is developing a strategy, and I don't see it's happening with this current administration, but there are elections soon, having a better strategy for the next U.S. president, whoever he or she may be, to have a coherent policy that works with allies and achieves the mutual interest of these people of the region, including Israel and U.S. national security. And striking Iran at this particular moment, its nuclear assets, only to degrade it, to me just sounds counterproductive.
Shira, what about another important asset to the Iranians, which is their oil industry, going after their oil facilities, which would be their source of income? Would you support a major attack on that?
Here's where we would differ, I think. First of all, it will have major political implications in the United States, I think, when elections, what is so, right, it's a coin toss election, and I think it will probably help Trump get reelected. But I'm moving away from the political considerations that are
because of the impact on oil prices. Is that what you're saying?
on oil prices, which are, by the way, pretty high as is. My fear is that as we're looking at supply chains, the freedom of navigation, a world that is struggling with inflation finally is starting to come lower. If we can extract a toll and hurt Iran without hurting the rest of the world, I would opt for that option, and also leaving some ladders in the escalation, some steps in the escalation ladder if we need to get there. So I would be against it. There are plenty of targets if we need to make a decision. And maybe I'll just end with this. We talk about like how we Israelis, we're very emotional and we want to respond and attack and revenge. And the Iranians, right, they're supposed to be those chess players, and think we can try giving them some of their own, medicine, and just preserve the right for a response and drag them and scare them and not respond exactly now. Just wait it out a little bit. This is also an option.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a head game. What about playing that head game instead, Michael? Just letting Iran stew for a while.
No, you can't do it for very long. The Israelis can't do it for very long. They can do it a little bit. They've been doing it over the last week for two reasons. I don't agree with Shira that the Biden administration is giving Israel a list of acceptable options to strike Iran. The Biden administration is formally doing that, but it clearly does not want Israel to strike Iran at all. And we've seen it historically. That's the way it was. That was their message back in April. They're doing everything they can now to string out the decision making and to offer Israel options other than striking, including economic sanctions. The Americans have gotten a little tougher in the last week with the British against the Houthis. That's part of the negotiation with the Israelis to say, well, don't strike Iran. We'll work together on fighting the proxies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are risks of inaction, John. When the Biden said to the Israelis last April, take the win, because only one Israeli citizen died as a result of those attacks in April. But what happened? The Iranians got a lot of information from the Israelis. They got information about Israeli defenses, and they got information about the capabilities of Iran's weapons. And it shifted tactics. The first time it sent combined strike packages, drones, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles. This time in October 1, it sent only ballistic missiles. Why? Because Israel has a multi-tiered defense system. And what the Iranians decided to do was to saturate only one tier, by sending 200 ballistic missiles, and it succeeded. This attack was more lethal than the one was more successful, let's say from the Iranian point of view, than the one before it. The next one is going to be more successful than this one because of the experience that the Iranians are gaining. The Israelis have lost deterrent capability. It's becoming acceptable that a country launches massive ballistic missile barrages against another or against Israel to the international community. The only way to stop that, as I've said time and again, is to take from the Iranians things that they hold dear. And American policy, unfortunately, is putting a shield over Iran and giving them a wall behind which to shoot their missiles.
That's interesting. Jared, do you agree that the American policy is effectively protecting Iran at this moment?
Before I get to American policy, I find it a bit weird not to think that the next time Iran retaliates won't be even more severe. It's true that some of their ballistic missiles they emptied on us, but these were the Fatah missiles. They have the Imad, they have the Radar, they have the Sajil. They have stuff in their arsenal. To me, it feels that the next attack will be even more escalatory against Israel.
That's what I'm saying.
So I just don't understand if we hit them and we hit them hard. Presumably we will not be able to take out all their all their nuclear sites and all their the arsenal of their missiles. This is not something that we can do, not at the moment. I mean, it's okay to exact a cost, and let's think how we do this, but we need to understand that there will be a price, even for a strike.
Oh, absolutely. But you're locked in this dynamic. You're locked in this dynamic. So your choice is continue to absorb these strikes whenever Iran decides to shoot them, or to begin to exact a price from Iran. American policy is refusing to extract a price directly from Iran, including, by the way, the economic sanctions that a minute ago you said you would be in favor of. And I say that, yes, the administration rhetorically is saying to the Israelis, hey, let's do a new packet of sanctions. But all the sanctions that we need to extract a price from Iran are already on the books. They're just not being enforced. So Iran's oil sales to China are at record levels.
Can I ask? I want to ask about some possible ramifications of a major military strike on Iran. And I've kind of asked you this a few times already, but I'll put it more bluntly. There's a lot of concern that doing something like that would, to put it most extremely, would lead to World War III, that it's just going to get bigger and bigger. It's going to bring in the other superpowers. And I'd like to see if either of you sees that as a real prospect. And Shira, do you want to go first?
I mean, I don't, we had 2 world wars and they look different from one another, and I don't know what the third one would look like. But if we look at Iranian-Russian ties, Iranian-Chinese ties, and as you said, Mike, correctly so, right? It's because of China. They're able to basically not suffer economic consequences because China is the main consumer of their oil. It will definitely strengthen this axis. Whether it will translate into actual direct confrontation between the United States and turn the great power competition into full-on great power war depends on so many things.
I understand that there's that problem with the question is who can predict the future, but it is a question that I think it's at the core of let's de-escalate here on the part of the Biden administration. Michael, same question to you. I mean, can this thing are there high odds that this thing would spin out of control, or by your analysis, is it quite containable?
I believe it is containable. I believe that that deterring Iran, which is what we're talking about, is the key to preventing the wider war, the sort of global escalation that you're talking about. What Iran has done in this conflict is it has hung out its shingle to Beijing and to Russia and said, for example, to Beijing, it said, look, if you want to launch a war against Taiwan, to take Taiwan, we can be of great service to you because we can pull all of these American naval assets back into the Indian Ocean and tie them down while you're busy on Taiwan. The weak link in the axis of China, Russia, Iran is Iran. Iran has enormous vulnerabilities. It has no regular air force to speak of. It has no regular military to speak of. It has its nuclear program, its nuclear weapons program, and which is a threat. The threat that it might go for a bomb that restrains the administration, and it has these ballistic missiles, drones, and cruise missiles. That's all it has. Terrorism, with those disruptive military capabilities, and its nuclear program. It's the weak link, and if we take it out, then Russia and China will have no asset to deploy in the Middle East.
Okay, another question about ramifications. We already see as a result of the war.
Sorry, John, I just want to say.
Okay, come in, then I want to move on. Please go ahead.
I apologize. When we say take it out, the surest way to take out anything that has to do with Iran is occupy Iran. And no one is planning to do this. And this is where we can achieve damage. We cannot destroy Iranian nuclear capabilities. We're in the process of destroying their proxies, which is extremely important and a major asset. But we cannot destroy their complete capabilities, nuclear capabilities at the moment. And we cannot change their behavior doing, I think, what Mike is proposing. And this is the real challenge. How do we change Iranian intent and behavior?
We're in a situation now where, with Israel's war in Gaza, Israel is facing more global isolation and criticism probably than it ever has, including in the United States. There's more anti-Israel sentiment publicly expressed than there ever has been, certainly in my lifetime. What would be the impact of a strike in Iran on that dynamic, Michael? And does it matter? My sense is, Michael, you would say that's a price that has to be paid, but does it matter?
The anti-Israeli sentiment that is being expressed in the United States is the product of about 3 decades of progressive indoctrination at our institutions of higher education. So these people are ideologically opposed to Israel. They are not reacting to something that Israel is doing. They are pre-programmed to criticize Israel. The support for Israel in the American society writ large is very high. The main locus of the kind of feeling you're talking about, the main locus is the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the institutions of higher education. This is something that we should be concerned about. I mean, as a society, because we have professors inculcating students in support for terrorist organizations that are opposed to the United States. This is not a healthy.
Your feeling is that a strike on Iran would potentially give them more confirmation of their views, but that's just a given. Holding those views is just a given. That there wouldn't be a broader turn of the tide against Israel among the larger American public.
When someone says from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, that's not the beginning of a discussion about a better policy.
Mm-hmm. And what about globally in terms of say your vision of this thing were to come to pass? The U.S. Green lights and potentially even participates in an attack on Iran. Does the U.S. have allies other than Israel in that sort of action?
It has tacit allies. Everyone in the Middle East that is in part of the American alliance system is disturbed by the rise of Iran under the Biden administration and the impunity with which Iran shoots ballistic missiles at neighbors. It's not just at Israel that they're shooting these ballistic missiles. They don't have the capabilities themselves to do anything about it. One of the interesting stories about the wars over the last year is the absence of any kind of really serious opposition to it from our Gulf allies. They're just sitting on the sidelines watching. They occasionally make statements through their foreign ministries about concern for the welfare of Gazans and so on, but they're not agitating for the United States to step in and shut Israel down. They're not activating the Europeans to try to work against Israel. It's really a remarkable change in the Middle East that Prime Minister Netanyahu in his speech at the UN, he held up the two different pictures of the Middle East, the blessing and the curse of the Middle East. He's not wrong. But what's amazing is that it's the United States. It's the job of the United States to present that picture to the world and to present a picture of a proper order in the Middle East. And the United States as the leader of a coalition to restrain all of the worst pathologies of the region. The United States is not performing its role.
Shira, do you want to comment on that? Yeah, please do.
Yeah. I want to respond to a few to your two previous questions, if it's okay, and I'll also go back to something that Netanyahu said actually at Congress. He said that Israeli actions help keep American boots off the ground in the Middle East, and in fact, this is not the case. What we're seeing is more American troops on the ground now after October 7th, and if we follow what Mike is suggesting, there'll be more and more American troops, and I think this will strengthen opposition to U.S. even among mainstream Americans. And I agree with Mike. We see growing anti-Semitism on both sides, on the extreme left and the extreme right. But mainstream Americans are there. But I think if we're going to start seeing American die on behalf of something they interpreted as a result of an Israeli action, this will be very severe. I'll also say something that, as you know, and we can argue all the time about U.S. policy, but what Israel has sought to do throughout the years until recently is to maintain bipartisan support for Israel. This is a key. If I think of one strategic pillar of Israeli national security, is the bipartisan support. If it looks in the United States as if the Prime Minister of Israel interfered in the elections, and that being pro-Israel makes you lose the elections, that will be very dangerous for Israel long term. Now, I think on the regional partners, and being here in Israel, we feel the embargoes and we feel the BDS and the kind of like silent boycott. No one wants to deal with Israel. Why do we need the headache? So it's not explicit, but it's more implicit, but it's there. But also when we talk about the region, maybe the region is not telling the US to stop or Israeli to stop. But the fact is that we're seeing Saudi Arabia. We saw a visit by the Iranians in Saudi Arabia 2 days ago. There's normalization between Saudi Arabia and Iran, Bahrain and Iran, which is not something that I had thought I'd see before. They want de-escalation. All these countries in the region want de-escalation. And maybe the peace agreements with Israel have not been broken yet, and I hope they never will be. But if you look at ties between Israel and Egypt now, ties between Israel and Jordan, a normalization that is much, much farther away than it was on October 6th. I think for the region, this dynamic is very, very dangerous and and stands in counter to what both Biden said he wants to do and what Trump did do, furthering regional integration.
All right. We're coming up to our closing round, but before we do that, I want to take one more question that speculates about the future. We're coming up, of course, to a presidential election in the United States. We know what the status quo is. There's an assumption that Kamala Harris would most likely continue in the same direction as the Biden administration. But let's say Donald Trump wins the White House. Michael, day one of a Trump presidency, do things change in this regard that we're talking about, an attack on Iran?
Yes. What happens with the Trump administration is that it's sort of gut level identification with Israel, with Israel's war against Iran, and its hostility to Iran, its gut level hostility to Iran, will create a lot of more productive conversations with the Israelis. The problem is that Iran is, from the point of view of what we're talking about, is that Iran is not going to be on the top of the list of priorities of the Trump administration when it comes in. And there's a strong inclination in the Republican Party that's similar to the progressives on the Democratic Party to pull back from the Middle East. What we need in the Middle East is a credible military threat against Iran. I did not advocate, as Shira seemed to suggest at one point, that we need to have a massive occupation of Iran. We need to strip Iran of capabilities, and we need to send a message to the Iranian leadership that we can cause trouble for it beyond what it is willing to tolerate. That's what we need to do.
Shira, same question for you. Trump administration, what changes?
It's pretty interesting. I think that someone was a president for 4 years and still I find it quite unpredictable what he will do in office. I read the Republican Party platform. I have his 20 points. These issues are not mentioned there. Isolationism runs, I think, on both sides. There's this whole idea of like American focus on more domestic policies. And if anything, the challenge is the great power competition. So I really, it's hard for me to say. There's no question that maybe Trump will be supportive of it. I don't know how much he's going to actually devote resources and American lives to enabling Israel, supporting Israel as he does that. There are other challenges, military assistance. He said everything will be turned into form of loans. Israel is going to negotiate a new MOU in the next few years with the administration. All these questions come in, and there could be a point where Trump will want to enter a new nuclear agreement with Iran. This is not out of the realm of possibilities.
Let's move on now to our closing round, and those are closing statements from each of you. Michael, you're up first. Once again, you're making the argument that Israel should strike Iran. One more time to tell us why, please.
John, in the last 10 years, there have been two conceptions in Washington about how to deal with Iran. One conception says that the United States needs to lead a coalition of allies in the region that poses a credible military threat to Iran. That military threat can come either directly from the United States or from American allies. But the credible American military threat needs to be there in order to contain the potential escalation that could come from simply an allied attack that is an Israeli attack. The other conception says that what we should do is pull American troops out of the Middle East and engage Iran diplomatically, show Iran that we have no intention of attacking it in any way. That's the conception that the Biden administration inherited from the Obama administration. It's been pursuing it aggressively since it came to power. It's continued to pursue it even after October 7th. I think that we can now see that this approach, engaging Iran diplomatically, shielding it from direct attack, it doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. I think very rarely in history do we have two rival conceptions like this, which are tested and shown to be so clearly, and one is shown to be so clearly inadequate. I think we just have to bite the bullet and understand that the source of all of the disruptions, the major source of all the disruptions in the Middle East, is Iran, and the only way to end those disruptions is by deterring it militarily.
Thank you, Michael. Shira, you get the final word in this debate. You get the closing statement that comes second, and that is the final word. Once again, you are telling us that Israel should not strike Iran, at least in the terms that Michael is arguing. Please tell us why.
Right. I am in favor of a credible threat on Iranian nuclear sites, and my argument is not that Israel should not attack Iran now and extract a cost from Iran now, but this should be limited, more meaningful than it was after the April 14th attack, but limited and demonstrative and contained in a way that helps Israel achieve its goal. It's not just Israel, obviously. Israel and the United States achieve their goal of degrading Iranian capabilities, eliminating the ring of proxies that Iran has circled Israel with, and not just Israel, a lot of American friends in the region. And for that, we need a much more strategic, we need a strategy. The fact that we see now as a window of opportunity to strike Iranian nuclear facilities, this is not how such a complex issue should be managed. There needs to be a holistic idea of how do we create an effective sanction regime? How do we speak with one voice when we talk about a credible military threat if Iran moves to another threshold, which it hasn't crossed yet, according to all the intelligence and all the material out there that at least I'm familiar with, and bolstering defenses and creating a regional coalition of American friends. We are now in October 2024. I'm sitting in Tel Aviv, we're all thinking and reflecting back on October 2023, but we have to look at October 2025. This is when the sunset on the JCPOA snapback sanctions are going to disappear. Basically, the sunset is going to come into effect, and we need to make sure that in October 2025, Iran is locked in a situation where it must make a choice not to break into a bomb.
Thank you very much, Shira. And that is a wrap on this debate. So I want to say thank you to Michael Doran and Dr. Shira Effron. We so appreciate that you came to the table together, that you heard each other out, and that, in short, you were what we call being open to debate. Michael, Shira, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and to the listeners who are observing the Eve of Yom Kippur, Gmar Chatima Tova.
Thanks a lot, John. Thanks, Shira. It was a lot of fun.
And I also want to thank all of you, our audience, for tuning into this episode of Open to Debate. We are a nonprofit that is working to combat extreme polarization through civil debate. And our work is made possible by listeners like you and by the Rosencrantz Foundation and by supporters of Open to Debate. Robert Rosencrantz is our chairman. Our CEO is Clea Connor. Leah Mathau is our chief content officer. Elizabeth Kitzenberg is our chief advancement officer. This episode was produced by Jessica Glazer. Editorial and research by Gabriella Mayer and Andrew Foote. Andrew Lipson and Max Fulton provided production support. The Open to Debate team also includes Gabrielle Iannicelli, Rachel Kemp, Eric Gross, and Linda Lee. Damon Whittemore mixed this episode. Our theme music is by Alex Clement, and I'm John Donvan. We'll see you next time on Open to Debate.